There's been a lot of news this week on the Donald Trump legal front. We found out stunning new details about a memo one of his lawyers wrote on how to overturn the results of the 2020 election. He sued his niece over damning tax documents he inadvertently admitted were real. His lawyers knew days after the election their claims of widespread fraud were BS. And there are reportedly more indictments coming in the Trump Organization tax fraud case. For more on all that, it's time for a closer look. It's been so nice not having to think or care about what Donald Trump's been up to these past few months. It's like when you finally get a cast removed and you get to shower without taping a plastic bag to your arm, which is why it's such a bummer that he and everyone around him keep hinting he might run again in 2024. It's kind of like how Mets fans are relieved when the season's over so they can stop feeling miserable, and then they remember, oh, right, the Jets. But hey, look on the bright side. At least the Jets can only lose once a week. They're Thursday this week? That said, even though it's liberating to have Trump out of the news, it's still important to hold him accountable for his crimes and prevent him from doing again what he tried to do in 2020. He's still implicated in multiple investigations across the country, as CNN pointed out when they tried to list all of his ongoing civil and criminal matters in a recent segment.
He is still facing a slew of different lawsuits. We have a full screen that show all of the criminal cases and civil. I actually do not have time to go through them all.
Trump has so many legal problems, CNN doesn't even have time to go through them all. CNN, they're a 24-hour news network. All they do is the news. It's not like they hand it off at 4 p.m. to their baking show, The Need with Jake Tapper, or their 5 p.m. dating show, On the Prowl with the Wolf. And on top of all that, Trump is now suing his own niece.
Former President Donald Trump has filed a lawsuit in New York State court. This time, he's suing his niece, Mary Trump, and 3 New York Times journalists over what he's called the illegal disclosure of his tax information.
Mary Trump said this in response, quote, "I think he's a loser. It's desperation. The walls are closing in, and he's throwing anything against the wall that he thinks will stick. As is always the case with Donald, he'll try and change the subject."
Imagine suing your own niece. I mean, fortunately, his lawyer does have experience suing family members since Rudy sued his cousin for divorce. But aside from the family drama, there's a crucial takeaway in this case that we should focus on, because in filing this lawsuit, Trump was forced to admit that all those stories about how he had lost tons of money and paid virtually nothing in taxes, which he had previously dismissed as fake news, were actually true. For example, you might remember that in 2018, the New York Times reported that Trump engaged in all kinds of suspect tax schemes as he hoarded the wealth handed down by his father. Then in 2019, the Times reported that Trump had lost over $1 billion in the 80s and 90s. And then in 2020, the Times reported that Trump paid $750 in federal income taxes the year he won the presidency in his first year in the White House. He paid another $750. He had paid no income taxes at all in 10 of the previous 15 years, largely because he reported losing much more money than he made. He was in the Oval Office as President of the United States, and he only paid $750 in federal income taxes to the country he was in charge of. That's like finding out Tim Cook has an old Motorola flip phone. $1,000 for an iPhone? No, thank you. I will stick to texting in T9. There were all kinds of shady gimmicks documented in these stories, some of which amounted to outright fraud that could constitute criminal tax fraud, as the Times put it. And yet somehow it's at risk of being one of those insane Trump stories that just goes flying by in history classes decades from now. Textbooks will be replaced by little microchips they implant in your brain, and high school sophomores will just sit there as they download the entire Trump presidency into their cerebral cortex. Impeached twice? $750? Did the Carlton dance? Anyway, the point is, when that story came out, Trump, as usual, claimed it was fake.
In your tax return, sir, does that sound right that you were paying a couple $100s a year in federal income taxes?
It's fake news. It's totally fake news. Made up, fake, totally fake news. No, actually, I paid tax. And you'll see that as soon as my tax returns. It's under audit. They've been under audit for a long time. They're under audit. And when they're not, I would be proud to show you. But that's just fake news. I mean, the stories that I read are so fake. They're so phony.
Oh, man, remember that whole audit thing? I'm sure that'll be wrapped up any day now. The audit is taking longer than it took to get season 3 of Succession. You're making us wait until October 17th, HBO? That's like a month from now. This is taking longer than it takes Kendall to say, Dad? Seriously, though, whatever happened with that audit anyway? I mean, I'm not an IRS auditor, but I would assume Trump would be the dream case. If I worked there, I would open up every manila folder They put on my desk like Charlie Bucket opening a Wonka bar. I mean, just like, we're looking for Trump. It's the golden ticket. But no, we can't go after Trump for decades of brazen tax fraud. Some woman named Lorraine in Little Rock wrote off a pedicure as a business expense, so let's rain hell down on her instead. Lorraine feels more confident when her feet look good, and that does make her a better travel agent, so lay off Lorraine. Anyway, Trump called it fake and phony, but in his lawsuit against his niece, Mary Trump, he was forced to admit that he was lying when he said that, and that the tax documents were actually authentic. In the lawsuit, Trump's lawyers write that Mary Trump came into possession of more than 40,000 pages of highly sensitive, proprietary, private, and confidential documents, including, but not limited to, financial documents, accountings, tax records, income tax returns, bank statements, legal documents, and other related documents. So they're admitting the documents were real. I feel like this should be big news, but then again, I doubt Trump supporters are at home poring over legal proceedings, deciphering the veracity of his claims. Honey, it says here the tax documents were authentic, which would imply, of course, that when the president called them fake news, he wasn't being entirely truthful. It only stands to reason, then, that he's been lying about other things. Hand me the horse medicine. I need to think. No. Not the pills, the paste. So Trump's got a mountain of legal issues, and now we know that even by Trump's own admission, all those allegations of tax fraud from the Times were based on authentic documents. With all that said, at this point, it's clearly very unlikely Trump himself will be indicted or arrested for anything, which is insane. His company is accused of fraud. He's personally accused of all kinds of shady tax avoidance gimmicks. Robert Mueller accused him of 10 different instances of obstruction of justice. He was an unindicted co-conspirator, an indictment to cover up hush money payments to a porn star. He incited a violent mob to attack the Capitol and overthrow democracy. He tried to shake down a foreign country to interfere in the 2020 election. His hotels raked in money from foreign governments and lobbyists while he was president. And he basically tried to commit election fraud by bullying the Georgia Secretary of State into magically finding 11,000 more votes. And yet somehow, as always, he seems likely to escape.
Do you think that any of these have traction still?
Well, I think on the criminal cases, no. I don't think it's likely Donald Trump is going to get arrested at this point. I think there was various bases that he could and should have been charged, from Mueller obstruction to January 6th to, potentially even with the Trump Organization. But given the signs we're seeing from prosecutors, I don't think it's particularly likely unless something changes.
Kind of feels like we're in the purge, except Donald Trump is the only one who's allowed to break laws. Like, he can just walk around and do whatever he wants, and the feds, for some reason, can't touch him. At this point, Trump could park his car in front of a fire hydrant, and instead of towing him, they just let the building burn down. So being Donald Trump basically makes you above the law, but being close to Donald Trump does not, which is why so many of his aides and associates have been indicted, and why his business and his various cronies are still facing serious consequences. If Trump's the bull, his friends and associates are the china shop. Trump's like a tornado. No one ever catches the tornado, but if you get too close to him, you end up like the cow on top of a Radio Shack 5 miles from your farm. For example, the former CFO of the Trump Organization, Alan Weisselberg, has already been indicted for tax fraud, and this week his lawyers said in open court that they're expecting more indictments soon.
Just into CNN, this could be significant. News from a pretrial hearing for the former Trump Organization CFO, Alan Weisselberg. Manhattan prosecutors have charged Weisselberg in a broad alleged tax evasion scheme. Just moments ago, his attorney said in court that he has, quote, strong reason to believe that more indictments are coming in.
He said that he just received today a manila envelope that he held up in court with a bulge in it. And he said within that, he was told that there were 3 million documents. He said that these documents were found in a co-conspirator's basement and that they were tax documents.
Man, this Trump tax case has more twists and turns than a Trump rally dance and more wrinkles than Nicki Minaj's cousin's friends. Guys, I know we're all rightfully focused on other things, but apparently while we're not paying attention, they're finding manila envelopes full of secret tax documents in the basements of Trump Organization co-conspirators. Who's the lead investigator? Nicole Kidman in a shawl? I just found a passport with a different name in my husband's lockbox. I don't know what to think. Well, he's cheating on you. I just don't know. Okay, but it's that. It's always that. Then, of course, there are the Trump cronies who are facing consequences for their roles in Trump's attempts to overthrow the results of the election. This week, the Times also reported that even though Trump's lawyers spent months claiming there was widespread fraud, a lie many Republicans and right-wing media figures are still repeating, they knew pretty much right away that their claims were total bull.
The New York Times reports on new court filings in the defamation lawsuits against the Trump campaign by Dominion Voting Systems, which, according to the Times, shows that the campaign knew that claims made by lawyers close to Trump that the voting machine company conspired to steal the election were entirely baseless, entirely made up.
New information tonight on the outrageous measures Donald Trump went to overturn the election results. A memo from Trump's campaign 2 weeks after the election indicated the campaign knew that claims from Trump lawyers Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell were false. Claims that a voting machine company, Dominion, had worked with a software company, financier George Soros, and Venezuela to steal the election. The memo saying the Trump campaign knew those were false claims was obtained by the New York Times from court papers.
That's right. They knew it was all a lie and they pushed it anyway, which is good news for Dominion. Maybe that $1.3 billion they're suing for isn't enough. If things keep going this way, Rudy's going to have to get a job as a building super just to pay off his legal debts. Your toilet's clogged. Damn, I was hoping I could use it. Here, let me get my plunger out of my briefcase. I keep one on me at all times in case I need to go at my law office, which is also a Starbucks. All of this means Trump's lawyers knew what they were saying was a complete fabrication when they went on TV and made claims like these.
What we are really dealing with here and uncovering more by the day is the massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference with our elections here in the United States. The Dominion voting systems, the Smartmatic technology software, and the software that goes in other computerized voting systems here as well, not just Dominion, were created in Venezuela at the direction of Hugo Chavez to make sure he never lost an election. It's been organized and conducted with the help of Silicon Valley people, the big tech companies, the social media companies, and even the media companies. And I'm going to release the Kraken.
At this point, the Kraken is going to release a statement distancing himself from Sidney Powell. I don't get involved in politics. I'm just out here to sink a few tall ships. Although it was nice that we briefly got to meet Sidney Powell as another psychotic character in this whole mess. I assume she went back to her original job as the chicken from Paw Patrol or the headmaster telling orphans they'll never get adopted. You're too old and nobody loves you. Also, in retrospect, it's maybe a tell that they knew they were lying that Rudy is sweating profusely. It looks like he just walked in from a rave. Even knowing that all these claims were lies, Trump's lawyers still crafted a plan for overthrowing the election. Specifically, a lawyer named John Eastman wrote a detailed memo laying out a path for Vice President Mike Pence to invalidate Electoral College votes and throw the election to Trump. And remember, while this was happening, Trump and his cronies were also coordinating with a Justice Department official named Jeffrey Clark to issue a statement claiming there was widespread fraud in the election, a plan for a coup that they came very close to pulling off.
Stunning new details on Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election from the new book Peril by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. The authors report on a 2-page memo drafted by John Eastman. John Eastman is a conservative lawyer who was working for Trump's legal team. It amounts to a blueprint for a coup. NBC News has later obtained the memo. It outlines how Pence was to have disrupted the certification of the Electoral College results and handed the election to Trump. Eastman predicts an immediate backlash and lays out Plan B. He writes this, quote, howls, of course, from the Democrats who now claim that 270 electoral votes are required. So Pence says, fine, pursuant to the 12th Amendment, no candidate has achieved the necessary majority. That sends the matter to the House. Republicans currently control 26 of the state delegations. President Trump is reelected there as well. Trump tells Pence this about Eastman, quote, you really need to listen to John. He's a respected constitutional scholar. Hear him out. Listen to John.
I like that this was Trump's best attempt to sway Pence. He's like a husband trying to convince his wife to let him keep gambling by inviting his bookie over. You got to listen to him, honey. He knows a lot about horses. Not only did they have a plan, they had multiple versions of the plan. They had a plan B, as if when you stage a coup and it fails, you get a second shot. It's democracy. It's not a claw machine. Give me another 50 cents. I almost had the bear. I think they made the claw weak on purpose. I mean, what was plan C? Have Sidney Powell strap individual senators to their beds and sledgehammer their legs misery style? Get ready for the Kraken. The Republican Party is still very much enthralled to Trump and Trumpism, with aspiring GOP candidates pledging their loyalty to him all the time and mimicking his brand of corrupt authoritarianism, which is why it's so important to hold him accountable for his actions and make sure he and his acolytes can't pull off next time what they tried to do last time. And that's why we need far-reaching reforms to our electoral system. So if you're a lawmaker concerned about the future of our democracy, it's time to get
Kraken.
You've been a closer look. God's Love You Deliver cooks and brings over 2 million meals a year to men, women, and children living with HIV, AIDS, cancer, and other serious illnesses, and they need your help now more than ever. If you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe, get vaccinated. We love you.